regarding the claim that an unborn child does not possess personhood because they're not physically or mentally developed enough or are too dependent, let me share a few thoughts. When there's a car crash and people die, does society view it as more or less tragic if the victims are children? More or less tragic if a baby is killed? Why? Why? Really think about that. Why? Why doesn't anybody say, oh man, at least it was only a baby and some kids. They were dependents and they weren't adding very much to society, so no real loss. It's because God has coded into our moral conscience that children are to be treasured, nurtured, and protected. We have a moral obligation to show greater care, not less, to the vulnerable and weak among us. Our this is what drives me crazy, the hypocrisy in just reason and logic. Our culture was shouting this exact moral obligation from the rooftops when it came to COVID for the past 2 years. We must protect the vulnerable among us. What about the sick? What about the elderly? I didn't hear a single abortion advocate responding with, but they're a drain on society anyway. They're old. They're no longer contributing to the greater good. They're too dependent. They're basically not even people anymore. Why should we care? Let's clean up the gene pool. Nobody said that. There's a school of thought that the weakest among us should be exterminated. All those with terminal diseases, handicaps, Down syndrome, etc. That school of thought is called eugenics. And it's what Hitler was trying to accomplish through the Holocaust and the development of his Aryan race. So it's an approach not generally viewed favorably. When the discussion comes up of how do we solve Vancouver's homeless problem, or how do we care for those with special needs, or how do we solve the problem of care homes for the elderly, everybody knows that your answer shouldn't start with the words, well, Hitler had some interesting ideas about this. Everybody knows this. Why? Because our inherent moral conscience testifies that we have an obligation, a moral obligation, to take special care of the sick, the handicapped, the widow, the orphan, the elderly, and indeed the child. Our conscience testifies that the more vulnerable they are, the greater the care we should afford them. Abortion rejects that moral obligation and murders children when they are most vulnerable in the place where they should be least vulnerable, their mother's womb. Would you write this down? Universal moral law demands we show greater care, not less, toward those who are vulnerable and weak.